Donald Trump has a new plan to mess around with our elections, and the Supreme Court today decided to help him.
Sort of.
Sort of, but I'm gonna tell you why it's could be very, very damaging. But let's give you the whole story first.
So the Supreme Court did in fact provide President Trump with a partial victory in a decision that they made in regard to his executive order on mail-in ballots. Now, I'm gonna give you the context so you can understand what the executive order indicated or what Trump tried to do through the executive order, and then we'll get to the nuances of the Supreme Court decision. So back in March, Trump had signed an executive order that would essentially use the post office to determine who is eligible to vote by mail and who will be receiving a ballot in the mail. So the post office would basically send the ballots after determining who's eligible to vote. And Trump is doing this under the false pretense of, we have a big problem with undocumented people voting in our elections, which is not borne out by the facts or the evidence. I think this is really about the fact that Trump knows how unpopular he is, and making it more difficult for people to vote translates to potentially less of a slaughtering of the Republican Party in the midterms, okay? So that's what I think is happening here. But to be specific, Trump's order directs federal agencies to create state citizenship lists of eligible voters. Those would be sent to state election officials and to the Postal Service, which could refuse to mail ballots for anyone whose name was not listed. So in response to this executive order, 23 states, led by California, decide to file a lawsuit. District of Columbia was also one of the leaders in this lawsuit. And they wanted to challenge the government's implementation of this order in federal court. So they go to federal court in Massachusetts, and they argued that the executive order conflicts with provisions in the Constitution that give states the power to determine voter eligibility and to set the times, places, and manner of holding congressional elections. Okay, so the federal judge in Boston decided to bar the government from applying the executive order's provisions in the midterms because it would create a direct and immediate dilemma, okay? But yesterday, the Supreme Court paused the injunction. Now, it doesn't mean that they have ruled in favor of Trump's executive order, but what they have ruled is that the states who are complaining, the states who have filed this suit, do not have standing because this hasn't been implemented yet. And since it hasn't been implemented yet, they can't argue that they have been harmed as a result of this executive order or that their constitutional rights were violated as a result of this executive order. So in its 10-page unsigned opinion, the majority said that it was too soon for courts to consider the state's challenge because the order has not yet been carried out, which means that the states have not suffered the kind of injury that allows their suit to move forward. However, the 3 liberal justices dissented in this decision. So in the 23-page opinion, Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson accused the majority of taking its eye off the ball and thus missing the government's actual objective to secure our imprimatur for its effort to foment chaos ahead of the November elections. So look, it is important to note, according to the Associated Press, the court's majority did not decide the legality of Trump's executive order. They simply said that the states that filed suit do not have standing yet. In fact, the justices warned that the decision was preliminary and should not be construed as a final determination on the legality of the order. And it also remains unclear whether the administration can implement the restrictions in time for mail ballots during the midterm elections.
The Supreme Court is lying. I can explain.
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, so when I first read, they didn't rule on the legality of Trump's order itself. I had the same reaction, which is, that's a little bit of relief, right? So maybe it's gonna be okay. States run elections, that's our system, period. The federal government doesn't have anything to do with how you vote in Minnesota or Alabama. And do you want, if you're a Republican, do you want Biden's administration running the elections in Alabama? No, there's a reason why states run their elections, okay? So that's our system, period. Now, what Trump's executive order is comically illegal. He says, no, since the post office is the federal government, I'm going to order the post office to simply not deliver the ballots of any person who is not on a list we're going to create. Now, they create a list that's only Republicans, hand it over to the post office, and of course it wouldn't be that comically outrageous. With Trump, you never know, but he could be missing a whole bunch of Democratic voters, 10%, 20%, well enough to make a difference in every election. And there's 1,000 easy ways to do it. Oh, they all had the same name, right? And they pick, and we've covered literally this tactic before. It's been done many times at the state level. They pick out stereotypically Latino names or Asian names, and they go, oh, same names. White names are left alone, but the other names are targeted and taken off the list. Oh, it must be fraud if there's 2 Juan Rodriguez's. No, there's hundreds of Juan Rodriguez's, for example, in LA, right? And so they take them all off. Another thing they do is, oh, we think that those voters are dead, so we're taking them off the rolls. Now, if you do this in enough time, it can be caught and redressed before the elections by the courts. But now, since the courts said we're not going to look at it until after the elections, Trump can create chaos by giving the list to the post office, and the post office run by Trump says, oh, we'll do whatever Trump says. And then they never send the ballots to a huge percentage of Democrats, thereby completely destroying the integrity of the elections and ironically doing voter fraud on a mass scale. So then afterwards, the Supreme Court goes, oh, is it too late now?
I report the news for a living, and one thing I never want to do is let one media outlet decide for me what the story is or which part of it matters. That's one of the reasons why I use Ground News. It's a website and app that brings reporting from across the political spectrum together in one place, but let me actually show you what that means. I can open basically any story and immediately see the bias distribution of the coverage. I can compare how outlets are writing their headlines, check the factuality ratings of the sources, and even see who owns them. So instead of just reading a headline and moving on, I have context about where that information is coming from and how differently the same story is being presented. But one of my favorite features is the blind spot feed. It specifically surfaces stories that one side of the political spectrum is barely even covering at all, which is incredibly useful if you're trying to get outside of your own media bubble. And you can create custom feeds around the topics you actually care about, so you can personalize what you follow and want to see more of. That's why I genuinely love Ground News. It gives me more control over how I consume the media, and I think that's something all of us could use right now. Go to ground.news/TYT or just scan the QR code to get 40% off the Vantage plan. That's the same plan we use. That's ground.news/TYT.
Well, the elections happened. There's nothing we could do about it. And golly gee, don't do that the next time. But I guess the Republicans are back in charge. You see, the Supreme Court, if you don't know that, that's normal because you didn't study law. But the Supreme Court justices know exactly what they did, and they just allowed Trump to try to massively cheat in this election.
I mean, shouldn't the Democratic establishment be celebrating this?
Yeah, because Israel is going to be firmly in charge now.
I mean, think about it. You have, I don't even know how many Democratic members of Congress right now doing whatever they can to destroy Abdul al-Sayed's chances of winning that Senate seat in Michigan, thus helping Mike Rogers win the Senate seat, the Republican. So like Democrats, you could rest easy. Just sit back, relax. Just let Trump do what he does.
And they probably will.
What are you guys worried about?
They probably will. That's probably exactly what they'll do. And they'll say, oh, there was nothing we could do. I was gonna say there's one potential hope here, which is Donald Trump's incompetence. Can he get a list to the post office in enough time? There's only about 70 days left before the election in order for this plan to work. But then as you were talking, I realized, oh, what am I thinking? Here's what's definitely gonna happen. They're gonna make a list in Michigan because Trump isn't gonna make the list. AIPAC's gonna make the list.
But how do they have information about voters in the state?
Oh, but that's easy. Yeah, there's voter rolls, super easy.
So they could just access those voter rolls, strike out all the Democrats and say Democratic
by the way, they could say, oh, look at this. We think all these Muslim names happen to be, problematic.
Then get your asses up and go to the polls. Okay, they want to prevent you from voting. Their cards are on the table. They're showing you exactly what they intend to do. So get your asses up and go vote.
And by the way, these days, what's hilarious is they might start discriminating against white names because they're like, oh, they're anti-Israel. Let's take out all these Christian voters who are anti-Israel. And so
make this backfire. Make this backfire. If you're a Democratic voter and you know that they're doing this to prevent you from voting, if you happen to be a Democrat who didn't even care and you weren't planning on voting, get your ass up and vote.
Yeah, and what that means, guys, is look, if you wanted to vote by mail, but they never got you your ballot, go to vote on election day. Right?
Yeah.
You could still go to the voting booths and do that. And so, yeah, and they'll do a bunch of tricks there. But if you get discouraged by their tricks, you're only helping them. Do not help them. Fight forward, fight past it. And look, the civil rights heroes got murdered by the Klan, survived a cavalry charge. Our founding fathers, a lot of them died on the battlefield, right? The least you could do is go and vote to protect our democracy. So don't let them win with these dirty tricks. Final thing on this is Trump votes by mail every time, and he just did it again. He says no one should be allowed to vote by mail, and then Jackass takes pictures of him and his entire family before they mail in their ballots. They're like, here's our mail-in ballots. Remember, these are fraudulent, and we're doing it. So what, Republicans, I mean, God, you don't want voter fraud. Great, by the way, I have great news for you. This study just came out. Out of 10 million votes, how many fraudulent votes were found in this meta study that was done? Maybe 400,000, that would be huge, right? That could affect an election, I hear you. 40,000 even could affect an election. 4 out of 10 million. It's microscopic, does not affect any election. By the way, the Heritage Foundation, a right-wing think tank, thinks it's even smaller than that. It's microscopic. You know what is massive voter fraud? When you purge the voter rolls of people you think are in one party or the other. Either side can do it, and it's an absolute disaster. You should not allow that kind of voter fraud. And you know it's nonsense, because if you're still part of the dumpster fire that's left of MAGA, and you're like, Trump can do no wrong. Well, he voted by mail, so if he can do no wrong, obviously voting by mail is fine.
You know, like the Trump administration could have not engaged in the Epstein file cover-up. Trump could have, avoided starting a war with Iran on Israel's behalf. He could have at least maybe carried out some of his campaign promises, but no, God forbid. He screwed over his own voters, his own base. And to provide cover for himself, he's engaging in these little games under this false claim that there's widespread voter fraud. It's amazing to me. The whole thing is amazing to me. But anyway, we'll see what happens. But if you're a Democratic voter who still believes in this uniparty system where Democrats are gonna be real fighters for you, please just show up to the polls and vote in person.
The Supreme Court is so corrupt.
The whole country is corrupt, guys. The system isn't working, okay? It isn't working on our behalf, let's just put it that way. And we can't go on with this corruption. We can't go on knowing that moneyed interests and foreign governments can just buy our politicians like prostitutes. This system is not working, and that needs to fundamentally change. Unless that changes, in my opinion, these elections are a joke. Okay, they're a joke. Because what we see time and time again is the new candidates get elected, they have all these big promises, and then eventually they acquiesce. And I'm sick of it. The reason why they acquiesce is because there's a lot of money pressuring them to acquiesce.
2028 is everything, everything. If we lose in 2028, wrap it up. The Palantir is gonna have 4 years to institute a surveillance state, flock cameras everywhere, data centers everywhere. Our economy's gonna be in tatters. They're gonna get us to fight each other and rip each other apart. It's like the oldest tricks in the book, right? Oh, hate people based on their race, whether it's white or black or Latino, it doesn't matter. Oh, Democrats and Republicans, all these fake fights, and then they're gonna turn us into a government that is not a democracy in any way, shape, or form. And so there's nothing after 2028. Either we win and we fix this country, or it's hopeless and it's gone. And I'm telling you that as a guy who's obsessed with hope, right? But we cannot survive another 4 years, especially with someone who is not a moron. If another bad guy comes in, which is almost everyone else in politics, right? And they have 4 years to brutalize this country on behalf of foreign governments and corporations and Silicon Valley, well then we're not gonna recover. So you gotta give me everything you got in 2028. And by the way, in 2026, because if Abdullah el-Sayed loses, They're all gonna say, oh no, you can't pick a populist, you can't pick a progressive, you can't pick anyone on the left. You have to pick a total ass kisser of the establishment and of the donor class. It has to be Buttigieg, it has to be, it has to be, it has to be. That's what they're gonna say 24/7 to try to trick every older Democratic voter, although luckily they're these days have a lot of them have gone rogue, which is awesome. But if Abdul wins, we're gonna say, what happened now? You said, oh, pick the establishment guy, pick the establishment guy. And what did they do? They lost and lost and lost. We picked Abdul and he won. It makes a giant difference. It's also true of Troy Jackson in Maine. It's also true of, I mean, look, if Angie Nixon wins in Florida, they got no case, none, zero. Because everybody's saying there's no chance that Angie Nixon can win. And especially because it's Florida and Florida loves Israel, not remotely true, but they just keep doing that propaganda over and over again. She has almost no resources. The Republican has all the resources. All the media hates her. All the media loves the Republican in the race, right? If Angie Nixon wins, they're in a world of trouble. Then they got nothing left. They could just keep lying like idiots and fools, but it's not gonna work. So these elections that are coming up in 70 days, monumentally important. And then 2028 is the whole enchilada. For as long, honestly, for my lifetime, that's gonna be it. Every time you ring the bell below, an angel gets his wings. Totally not true, but it does keep you updated on our live shows.